They say family is supposed to protect you. But what if the very people you trust the most choose to protect the one who tried to destroy you? My name is Samantha Carter, and the night I lay broken at the bottom of a hospital stairwell, I realized one truth blood doesn't always mean loyalty. My name is Samantha Carter, and I am 31 years old. If you looked at me on paper, you might think my life was steady, maybe even enviable. Director of marketing at a fast-growing tech firm. A master's degree that I had fought for through long nights bartending shifts and endless exams. An apartment in Boston that overlooked the city lights like a painting. People told me I was strong, independent, self-sufficient, and maybe in many ways I was. But strength can be a disguise. Independence can be a mask. The truth is, the thing I never truly had despite every accolade, every long hour of clawing my way upward, was security in my own family. For most of my life, I lived with a gnawing awareness, no matter how hard I tried, no matter what I achieved in my parents' eyes, I was never enough. That night in the hospital stairwell ripped the veil away. It showed me a truth I had been trying to avoid since I was a little girl. In my family, love had always been conditional. The memory is seared into me. The stairwell was quiet, sterile, filled with that faint echo of rubber soles squeaking against polished concrete. Madison walked behind me, her voice dropping the sugary tone she reserved for our parents. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed. I didn't even turn around at first. I was tired of her digs, tired of her shadow stretching into my life. And then it happened. A sharp shove between my shoulder blades. The weightlessness that followed felt surreal, like the ground itself had betrayed me. My body pitched forward into air, my hands clawing for the railing that wasn't there. Time slowed down, my shoulder slammed against the edge of a step, my hip cracked against another, my head whipped sideways into concrete. The pain was not a scream, but an explosion wave after wave tearing through me. I landed in a heap at the bottom. My vision blurred spots of white light dancing in my eyes. My lungs struggled for air, and above me, Madison's face came into focus, twisted in a smirk that made my blood run cold. "You deserved it," she whispered. My heart stuttered not just from pain, but from recognition. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't random. It was the culmination of a lifetime. Footsteps thundered. My parents, Patricia and Thomas, appeared in the doorway, their faces etched with panic. For a flicker of a second, I thought, finally they'll see. Finally, they'll protect me. But then I watched them rush right past me. My broken body was nothing more than background to the scene unfolding above me. They threw their arms around Madison, who had already conjured tears. My father's voice trembled. "It was an accident, right, Madison?" I tried to speak. I wanted to scream the truth. But only a groan escaped my lips. My ribs seared. My vision tunneled. My parents didn't hear me, or maybe they didn't want to. And lying there helpless on the cold floor, I understood something I had always known deep inside. I was never the chosen one. Pain does strange things to memory. As I lay there, fragments of my life flooded back, weaving themselves into the agony. I saw myself at 8 years old, beaming as my birthday cake was brought out. Strawberry filling pink frosting my name carefully piped across the top. I remember the giddy joy, the thrill of finally being celebrated. And then I remember Madison's tears. She was 5, confused, sad that it wasn't her day. Instead of comforting me, my mother called the bakery. By the time the candles were lit, the cake bore 2 names, Samantha and Madison. I remember watching her open my presents as if they had been hers all along. When I protested, my father knelt beside me, his disappointment sharp in his eyes. "Why can't you be more generous, Samantha? She's your little sister. She shares everything with you." But it wasn't sharing. It was taking. It was erasure. And on the hospital floor decades later, that old sting resurfaced. This time, it wasn't toys or birthday cake being stolen. It was my very body, my truth, my safety. Through the haze of pain, one detail pierced the fog: Nurse Linda Dawson standing at the top of the stairs. Her eyes weren't wide with confusion like my parents'. They were sharp, calculating. And then I noticed her glance upward toward the black dome of the security camera. She pressed a button on her handheld recorder. In that instant, a strange mixture of despair and hope surged through me. I couldn't rely on my parents. I couldn't rely on Madison's conscience. But maybe, just maybe this time, the truth wouldn't be buried under tears and excuses. This time, there was proof. Lying there, I thought about all the times I had swallowed my voice. The honor roll certificates pinned to my wall in high school ignored, while my parents took Madison out for a C-plus dinner celebration. The graduate degree I earned working 2 jobs overshadowed by Madison's new modeling photo shoot. The promotion to marketing director that came just 2 weeks before this incident, barely acknowledged at the family dinner where my parents gushed about Madison's growing Instagram followers. Every time I had told myself to endure, to be patient, to not rock the fragile family dynamic. Because that's what children of favoritism learn: your role is to shrink so someone else can shine. But now, as blood pooled warm beneath my cheek, I realized the cost. Endurance had not bought me love. Silence had not earned me peace. All it had done was embolden Madison. There's a strange clarity that comes in the moments when you're closest to breaking. As the fluorescent lights above me buzzed and blurred, I realized this fall might have broken my bones, but it had also broken the illusion I'd been clinging to my entire life. Family loyalty had been my prison, and here in this stairwell, I understood loyalty without love is just bondage. For the first time, even through the agony, I felt a flicker of liberation. Because when you've lost everything, your parents' support, your sister's affection, your body's strength, there is nothing left to lose. Only truth. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if the fall was the cruelest act or the necessary breaking point. Maybe it was both. Painful, devastating, humiliating, but also the spark that forced me to stop pretending. Because when I hit the bottom of those stairs, I hit the bottom of a lifetime of denial. And as I would soon learn, the stairwell didn't just capture a crime. It captured a story of betrayal, survival, and the strength it takes to finally stand up to the people who should have loved you most. When people ask me about my childhood, I usually pause before answering. Not because I don't remember it, but because I remember it too well. And what I remember doesn't fit into the neat little box most people expect when they think about an all-American family. A brick colonial house in an affluent Boston suburb. A swimming pool in the backyard. Parents who smiled politely at neighbors and served appetizers on fine china at dinner parties. On the surface, we were perfect. But beneath the glossy facade lived a truth no one saw, a truth stitched together by favoritism, silences, and the erasure of one child in favor of another. The memory of my 8th birthday is burned into me like a brand. For weeks, I had anticipated the day. My mother, Patricia, had promised me a cake with strawberry filling, the kind that always made my mouth water, and pink frosting with my name carefully written across the top. I had planned games with my friends, imagined opening gifts, and felt for once like the spotlight would finally shine on me. That morning, the house smelled like sugar and frosting. I wore my favorite dress, white with tiny blue flowers. I remember feeling almost dizzy with excitement. Then came Madison. She was 5 at the time, a whirlwind of blonde curls and wide blue eyes that seemed to melt our parents' resolve. I found her in the kitchen, sobbing loud theatrical sobs that echoed against the tiled walls. "What's wrong?" I asked, genuinely concerned at first. Between hiccups, she wailed, "It's not fair. I don't get a cake. I don't get presents. Why is it only her day instead of kneeling down to explain to her that birthdays take turns?" My mother's face softened with pity. She picked up the phone and called the bakery. "We'll fix this, sweetheart," she cooed into the receiver. By the time the cake arrived, my name had been altered. No longer was it "Happy Birthday, Samantha." Now it read, "Happy Birthday, Samantha and Madison." The sting of betrayal pierced sharper than any childish spat ever could. During the party, Madison tore into the wrapping paper of my gifts. "This one's mine," she declared with gleeful certainty. When I objected, my father pulled me aside. His expression wasn't gentle, it was stern. "Why can't you be more generous, Samantha? She's your little sister. She shares everything with you. You need to learn to do the same." I nodded through tears, but inside, something cracked. I realized generosity in my family was one-directional. It always flowed away from me and toward her. The birthday was just the beginning. Every achievement I had, every report card, every award, every late-night effort was met with indifference, sometimes even irritation, as though my success was inconvenient. Meanwhile, Madison's smallest steps forward were celebrated like triumphs. When I made honor roll in high school, my parents barely glanced up from their wine glasses. But when Madison earned a C+ in math, they took her out for dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. I told myself it didn't matter. I buried myself in books and extracurriculars and dreams of a life that stretched beyond our suffocating home. But no matter how high I climbed, my parents' gaze slid past me like I was invisible. It wasn't just neglect. It was constant comparison. "Why can't you smile more like Madison?" my mother would say, as if my serious nature was a flaw. "Why can't you loosen up? You're always so uptight," my father added, shaking his head when I stayed in to study instead of going out. It was as though my very essence, my discipline, my thoughtfulness, my hunger for knowledge, was a defect they wished they could iron out of me. As an adult, I've spent years in therapy trying to untangle the knots my family tied into me. What I've learned is that sibling favoritism is more than just an annoyance. It's a psychological wound. When one child is exalted and the other is diminished, it creates roles that can last a lifetime. I was the scapegoat, the one expected to endure, to bend to carry the weight. Madison was the golden child, adored, defended, shielded from consequences. These roles weren't just casual dynamics, they became part of our identities. And once established, they shaped how we saw ourselves and each other. For Madison, it bred entitlement. She learned early that tears opened doors, that manipulation worked, that love was hers to command. For me, it bred silence. I learned that my voice didn't matter, that my pain was inconvenient, that love had to be earned and still might never come. Some memories cut deeper than others. I remember being 12, clutching a certificate for winning the school spelling bee. I ran home, excitement bubbling inside me. Madison was sprawled on the couch, whining about how unfair it was that her favorite doll had broken. I held up my certificate. "Look, Dad, I won." He glanced up, distracted, muttered, "That's nice, honey," and turned his attention back to Madison. He promised her a new doll by the weekend. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow, holding the certificate against my chest, like proof that I wasn't invisible. And then, there was the time I came home with a college acceptance letter, my dream school. I expected at least a spark of pride. Instead, my mother frowned. "That's out of state. What about Madison? She'll miss you." Madison, standing behind her, smirked like she had just won another unspoken battle. Living in that environment did things to me. It made me hypervigilant, always scanning for approval that never came. It made me overachieve to the point of exhaustion, hoping each new accomplishment would finally tip the scales. It made me second-guess every decision, because somewhere inside, I believed I was always one step away from being dismissed. Most of all, it taught me to internalize blame. When something went wrong, my first instinct was to ask, what did I do to deserve this? That instinct was alive and well the night Madison pushed me. Even as I lay broken on the floor, some buried part of me whispered, maybe you provoked her. Maybe it really was your fault. That's what years of conditioning does, it twist reality until you doubt your own pain. By the time I reached adulthood, the pattern had calcified. I was the responsible one, the one who worked 2 jobs to pay for school, who paid her own rent, who never asked for help. Madison floated from one opportunity to the next, propped up by our parents' resources and blind faith in her potential. When I landed my first real job in marketing, I wanted to celebrate. Instead, dinner conversations turned to Madison's Instagram following and the boutique that wanted her to model. I sat there smiling politely while my own accomplishment dissolved into the background. Part of me wondered if they even noticed the sacrifices I had made. The sleepless nights, the skipped meals, the constant pressure of knowing that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough to outshine their golden girl. The hardest part wasn't the neglect, it was the gaslighting. The insistence that everything was fine, that I was imagining things. When I expressed frustration, I was told, "You're just jealous." When I pointed out unfairness, I heard, "Don't be so dramatic." When I tried to stand my ground, the refrain was always, "Why can't you be more like Madison?" Over time, those words sank deep into me, leaving scars invisible to the world. To outsiders, I was confident, competent, unshakable. But inside, I carried the weight of a child who had been told over and over that she simply wasn't enough. Looking back now, I see that the hospital stairwell wasn't the true beginning of Madison's betrayal. It was just the climax. The betrayal had been happening my whole life in tiny cuts that slowly bled me dry. The birthday cake, the ignored achievements, the constant comparisons, the way my parents' arms always opened for her but never for me. Those moments were seeds watered over years until they grew into the shove that sent me tumbling down those stairs. And maybe in some twisted way, Madison's act was just the physical manifestation of what my family had been telling me all along. You don't matter as much as she does. Childhood is supposed to be a foundation, a place where you learn who you are, where you're loved, not for what you achieve, but simply for existing. For me, childhood was a foundation of quicksand. I learned that love was scarce, conditional, and always in competition. That lesson followed me into every relationship, every workplace, every quiet moment of doubt. And though the scars aren't visible, they shape everything about me. Which is why when Madison pushed me that night, it didn't just hurt my body. It ripped open every old wound. And as I lay there, I wasn't just reliving the fall. I was reliving a childhood that had been stolen long before my feet ever left those stairs. Adulthood was supposed to bring freedom. At least that's what I told myself as I packed my bags for college. I believed that once I left the Carter household behind the brick house, the manicured lawn, the suffocating comparisons, I would finally breathe without the weight of favoritism pressing down on my chest. In some ways, I was right. College offered me a taste of independence. No one there knew me as the less favored daughter. Professors saw me for my work, classmates respected my discipline, and I carved out an identity that was mine alone. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the scars of my childhood would follow me into every lecture hall, every relationship, every late-night study session. Because no matter how far you run, you carry your family in your bones. While Madison drifted through her late teens with our parents' wallets cushioning her fall, I hustled. I worked 2 jobs waitressing at night and tutoring during the day, just to cover tuition and living expenses. I remember standing behind the bar one evening, pouring drinks for businessmen in tailored suits, and wondering if they could tell that I hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. I wore exhaustion like armor. My friends admired me for it. "You're so strong, Samantha," they'd say, marveling at how I balanced work classes and internships. I smiled, thanked them, but inside I thought, I'm not strong. I'm desperate. I'm trying to prove I'm worth something. Every shift I worked, every paper I wrote, every hour I spent awake when the world was sleeping, was driven by the same relentless question, will they finally see me by 30, my hard work paid off? I had climbed the corporate ladder faster than anyone expected. Landing the position of marketing director felt like a triumph carved entirely out of my own sweat and sacrifice. My colleagues respected me. My boss trusted me. For once, I wasn't invisible. Yet when I called home to share the news, the conversation was muted. "That's nice, honey," my father said, his tone distracted. My mother chimed in quickly. "Did you know Madison has a boutique interested in her modeling portfolio?" "Isn't that exciting?" I sat in silence, the phone warm against my ear. The promotion that had cost me years of exhaustion reduced to a footnote in a conversation about Madison's beauty. It was always like that. My victories became whispers. Hers became headlines. 2 weeks after my promotion, I attended a family dinner at my grandmother Margaret's house. She had been ill, and the gathering was meant to be a chance for us to spend time together. I arrived early, helping her settle in, fluffing the pillows on her chair, making sure she had water by her side. For a moment, I felt like my efforts mattered. She squeezed my hand, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Samantha. You've always been steady." Then Madison arrived, 2 hours late, of course. She swept in like a storm, her hair perfect, her perfume filling the room. She carried a tiny gift bag, waved it dramatically, and launched into excuses about traffic. Within minutes, the room revolved around her. Her stories, her charm, her endless self-promotion. I watched my parents' eyes light up as she spoke. I watched my grandmother's weary face try to stay engaged. And when Madison began discussing which of Grandma's jewelry pieces she should inherit, my stomach clenched. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout, "Do you hear yourselves? Do you see what's happening?" But I didn't. Years of conditioning pinned me to my chair. My role was silence. Always silence. That night driving home, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because Madison had stolen the spotlight again, that was expected, but because I realized how deeply ingrained my invisibility was. I had built a life on being seen in the professional world. Yet in my family's eyes, I was still the child in the corner clutching a spelling bee certificate no one cared about. Adulthood hadn't freed me. It had simply given me better tools to hide the wound. My career became a mask. My apartment became a shield. My independence became proof that I didn't need them, except in truth, I still did. I still wanted them to see me, to love me without conditions. And that longing was the cruelest part. Because no matter how many accolades I earned, the craving never disappeared. Meanwhile, Madison floated effortlessly. She dabbled in social media, posting photos that gained thousands of likes. She flirted with boutique modeling opportunities, her charm opening doors my hard work never could. And every stumble she made, missed deadlines, failed jobs, poor choices, was cushioned by our parents' unwavering support. "She's just finding herself," my mother would say, defending her. "She has so much potential," my father added, as though potential excused everything. I wanted to ask them, what about me? Don't I have potential? Haven't I proven myself? But the questions stayed lodged in my throat, swallowed like so many before. The older I got, the more distance stretched between us, not just physical distance, but emotional. Conversations with my parents felt like scripts. I'd share updates about my life, and they'd nod politely before steering the topic back to Madison. Even holidays were tainted. At Christmas, I'd spend weeks choosing thoughtful gifts, only to watch them light up when Madison handed them something hastily wrapped. At Thanksgiving, they'd gush over her stories while I quietly refilled drinks. I began to wonder if they even noticed my absence. If one day I stopped showing up, would they call? Or would they simply say, "She's busy," and carry on with Madison at the center? Therapists call this the invisible child syndrome. Children raised in households where favoritism reigns often learn to disappear emotionally. They become high achievers not because they're driven by passion, but because they're starving for recognition. That was me. My success wasn't built on joy, it was built on hunger. Hunger for acknowledgement. Hunger for the love that never came. And the tragedy of that hunger is that it never ends. No matter how much you achieve, it doesn't fill the void. Because what you wanted wasn't a title or a salary. What you wanted was to be held, to be told, "I see you. I love you. You are enough." The more I achieved, the more I realized the truth. Nothing I did would ever be enough to change the roles etched into our family. Madison would always be the golden child. I would always be the one expected to endure. That realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it meant the love I craved might never come. Liberating because maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to keep chasing it. But old habits die hard. And even as I whispered these truths to myself, I still picked up the phone, still called home, still hoped for pride in their voices that never came. By the time the hospital stairwell incident happened, the distance had grown into a chasm. We lived in different worlds, me defined by hard-won success, Madison defined by charm and indulgence. And yet somehow my parents' loyalty never wavered. That night, when they ran to her instead of me, I shouldn't have been surprised. It was the pattern of our lives crystallized into a single brutal moment. But lying on that cold concrete, I realized adulthood hadn't freed me from my role. If anything, it had shown me just how deep the script ran. And that was when I knew if I wanted to reclaim my life, I couldn't wait for their recognition. I would have to build my own worth, not on their approval, but on the truth. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw wasn't a familiar face or comforting arms. It was the hospital ceiling rows of sterile white tiles punctuated by harsh fluorescent lights. The brightness was so intense, it felt like it wanted to expose not only my injuries, but every truth I had been hiding from my entire life. I tried to shift slightly, and sharp pain sliced through my ribs. Each shallow breath burned. A calm, professional voice reached me. "Ms. Carter, I'm Dr. Andrew Miller. You've sustained serious injuries, several fractured ribs, a dislocated wrist, and a possible concussion. We'll need a CT scan and more X-rays. For now, please stay as still as you can." I nodded faintly. The pain flared like a knife, but at least his words carried honesty. No excuses. No family politics. Just fact. Then the door opened. My parents walked in. I could tell before I saw them my mother's jasmine perfume, my father's heavy footsteps. A small, naive part of me still hoped they would rush to my side, take my hand, and for once put me before Madison. But that didn't happen. "Where is she?" my mother asked immediately. "Is Madison all right?" My heart broke again. I lay broken in a hospital bed, and her only concern was the daughter who had pushed me down the stairs. Summoning every ounce of strength, I forced the words out. "She pushed me." Silence settled like a curtain. My father's brow furrowed, his voice low and uncertain. "No, Samantha. You must have slipped. Madison said she tried to grab you." My mother nodded quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Yes, that makes more sense. You're in pain, sweetheart. Don't jump to conclusions." I clenched my jaw. For the first time in my life, I said it with conviction. "No!" I didn't fall. She pushed me. At the far end of the room, Nurse Linda Dawson was watching. She didn't speak, but her eyes were steady. And when I glanced up, I saw her tilt her head slightly toward the hallway camera. My pulse quickened. For once, someone besides me knew the truth. After the doctors stepped out to prepare scans, my parents remained. Madison entered, looking like a fragile porcelain doll. She had carefully reapplied her makeup, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes glistening in a performance worthy of an award. "Sam," she said softly, using the nickname I despised. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wasn't thinking. Please believe me." My mother pulled her close, protective as ever. My father placed a manila folder on the bed, his voice stern but calculated. "This is a statement drafted by attorney Daniel Foster. If you sign, it will confirm that the fall was an accident. We'll put it behind us. Don't let this tear our family apart." I stared at the folder. For years, I had signed away my silence, my pride, my place in this family. But as my ribs screamed and my wrist throbbed, I knew this time would be different. "I won't sign," I said firmly. "Sam, please," Madison cried, her voice breaking. "I was reaching for you. You moved too fast. I would never hurt you." A bitter laugh escaped me, raw and cracked. "Then why did you whisper, 'You deserved it,' before you shoved me?" Her face faltered for a split second before resuming its mask of innocence. My mother rushed in with her usual script. "Don't be cruel, Samantha. Your sister loves you. She's devastated. Loves me?" I snapped. "Is that what love looks like? 3 broken ribs, a shattered wrist, a concussion?" My father's eyes hardened, his voice heavy. "Samantha, think about the consequences. Families survive by protecting each other. Don't ruin everything over a misunderstanding." This time, I met his gaze with a clarity I didn't know I had. "No. Families survive by protecting the truth. And you've been protecting the wrong person my entire life." The door swung open. Nurse Linda Dawson re-entered, flanked by a hospital security officer and Detective Rachel Coleman. The energy in the room shifted instantly. "We've reviewed the stairwell footage," Linda announced calmly. "And we've secured copies." Madison paled. My mother shot up from her chair, panic flashing in her eyes. "Cameras can be deceiving. Angles can distort things. There are multiple angles the security officer cut in. They all show the same outcome." Detective Coleman's gaze landed on me, then turned to my family. "We'll need official statements. A violent incident caught on camera is a serious matter." For the first time, the truth had witnesses. My chest ached, my body battered, but inside something powerful ignited. Anger, grief, exhaustion, yet beneath it all was a flicker of liberation. I had been dismissed, belittled, silenced all my life. Now, with one video, everything was exposed. I looked at Madison. She trembled, but I didn't see fragility. I saw a girl who had been coddled for decades, who had never been forced to face the weight of her actions. And now, the truth was staring back at her. My father still tried one final plea. "Samantha, be careful. You're breaking this family apart. Blood is blood. Think about what you're doing." I inhaled carefully, wincing through the pain. "You're right. Blood doesn't disappear, but it doesn't guarantee love, and I've bled enough for this family already." Detective Coleman's voice was cool, firm. "There will be an investigation. Until then, Madison Carter is not to be left alone with her sister. Madison's lips parted. For the first time, true fear flickered across her perfect face. As they left, the machines by my bed beeped steadily. My parents' protests faded down the hall. Madison glanced back once confusion etched into her features, as if she couldn't comprehend a world where her charm no longer rewrote reality. I closed my eyes. My body screamed, but my heart felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible daughter, the scapegoat, the silent witness. I was the one telling the truth, and this time, the world was forced to listen. The battle wasn't over. There would be courtrooms, lawyers, and family manipulation. But in that sterile hospital room, I made a vow to myself. No more silence. No more erasure. From this day on, I would live for me. Hospitals are strange places. They are both sanctuaries and battlegrounds, safe havens for healing, and at the same time, arenas where truth and lies collide under fluorescent lights. After the stairwell incident, I thought my battle was mostly physical. Broken bones, a wrist immobilized, bruises blossoming purple across my skin. But the real war had only just begun. Lying in that bed, I told myself the worst was over. The footage existed. Nurses had seen enough. Surely this time the truth would prevail. But I underestimated something more powerful than gravity, the weight of lies. 2 days later, my phone buzzed relentlessly on the bedside table. When I picked it up, I froze. Madison's face smiled back at me from Instagram, framed by perfect lighting, and the caption, "My heart is shattered." Last night, my sister had a terrible accident. She's been under so much emotional strain. I reached for her, but she fell before I could catch her. Please pray for her recovery. I would never hurt her. I love her more than anything. The comments rolled in like a tidal wave. You're such a good sister, Madison. Ignore the haters. We know you'd never do this. She's jealous, that's all. Stay strong. The bile rose in my throat. She hadn't just lied, she'd weaponized compassion. She turned herself into the savior me, into the unstable villain. And the world was buying it. Not long after, my coworker Denise messaged me. "Sam, are you okay? I saw something online. Tell me it's not true." The words gutted me. Tell me it's not true. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, it's not true. She pushed me. There's footage. Her reply was cautious. I hope so. People are talking at the office. Then came the call from Martin, my boss. His voice was clipped corporate. "Samantha, take all the time you need to recover. But there are concerns about perception. Clients talk. We'll hold down the fort." Translation: your job is safe for now, but if the narrative sticks, you're a liability. I hung up, heart pounding. Lies don't just wound reputations, they stain everything they touch. The next morning, my parents entered my room with attorney Richard Cooper in tow. He carried himself like a man who had cleaned up many messes for wealthy families. "Miss Carter," he began smoothly, as though I weren't his client, but an obstacle the footage is. Inconclusive. Yes, there was contact, but context matters. Stress over your grandmother's illness, emotions running high. A jury could see it as a tragic accident. My father leaned forward, nodding. "Exactly. We can settle this privately. Madison is willing to attend counseling. You just need to sign." He slid papers toward me. I stared at the documents, neatly typed paragraphs that would erase my truth. Years of conditioning whispered, "Just sign. Keep the peace. Don't make trouble." But the pain in my body screamed louder. "I won't sign," I said. My voice surprised even me, firm, unyielding. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Samantha, don't be vindictive. Your sister is suffering." I laughed bitterly. "She's suffering, I'm the one in a hospital bed." That night, I couldn't sleep. Machines beeped steadily, nurses drifted in and out, but my mind churned. I thought about lies, how they function in families. Psychologists call them defense mechanisms, but in my family, lies were weapons. Madison lied not just to protect herself, but to destroy me. My parents lied not just to shield her, but to erase me. Lies had always been Madison's currency. Crocodile tears at birthday parties, fake apologies at family dinners, dramatic sobs at school conferences. And my parents always cashed them in. Now she had simply scaled the tactic to a global stage Instagram. What terrified me wasn't just her lies, but how readily the world believed them. Lies don't need to be true, they just need to be convincing. And Madison was a master of conviction. The following afternoon, Nurse Linda Dawson entered quietly. In her hands, a hospital tablet. "You're strong enough now," she said softly. "Do you want to see the footage?" I nodded, throat dry. She pressed play. There I was on the grainy screen, hand gripping the rail body angled toward Madison. And there she was, stepping closer, her hand pushing forward with just enough force to shift my balance. Then impact. My body crumpled, rolling down hard concrete. The sight was brutal even to me who had lived it. But the worst part wasn't the fall. It was what came after, Madison leaning over, lips curling into that smirk, whispering words I already knew by heart. "You deserved it." My tears blurred the image, but the truth was undeniable. Linda placed a hand on my arm. "Lies are loud," she said, "but evidence speaks even when no one wants to listen." Later, hospital security and Detective Coleman showed the footage to my family. I wasn't present, but I heard fragments through the thin walls, my mother's voice trembling. "That angle, maybe it's misleading." My father's shaky. "There must be another explanation." Madison's sobs loud and rehearsed. Then Coleman's calm voice cut through. "The evidence is unambiguous. This was no accident." For the first time, my parents had no script, no excuses, just silence. The next day, Madison doubled down online. "She's confused," she posted. "Head injuries can affect memory. I tried to help her, and now she thinks I hurt her. Please, stop attacking me. This is tearing our family apart." The comments multiplied. Some called her brave, others pitied her. And me, I was once again cast as the jealous, unstable sister. But this time, the lies felt weaker. Beneath her post, a few voices pushed back. "Then why is there hospital security footage?" "Sources say the police are involved. Not looking good." The tide hadn't turned yet, but cracks were showing. Lies fracture when truth is too heavy to contain. That night, alone in my hospital room, I let the tears come. They weren't just for the broken bones or the humiliation. They were for the years of erasure, the decades of being told I was jealous, dramatic, unworthy. But the footage changed everything. Not because it fixed the past, it couldn't, but because it validated the present. It said, "You were right. You weren't crazy. You weren't making it up." For the first time, I felt a strange kind of power. Not triumph, not vengeance, just the quiet strength of being seen. Madison would keep lying. My parents would keep twisting narratives. That was who they were. But I didn't need their validation anymore. Because now, the world had seen the truth. The camera had captured what they spent a lifetime denying. Lies may shout, lies may spread. But when the evidence stands, tall, lies tremble. And this time, the camera had spoken for me. Hospitals are supposed to heal, but for me, they became holding cells, liminal spaces between the injury and the reckoning. 2 weeks after the fall, I was discharged, ribs taped, wrist in a cast head, still pounding with echoes of concrete. But the greater weight wasn't in my bones. It was in the looming court date, the preliminary hearing, where the state would decide whether Madison would face formal charges. The idea of sitting in a courtroom across from my sister, The girl who had smirked as I lay broken on cold steps filled me with dread. For 31 years, I had learned one lesson in my family's universe truth, bent around Madison like light bends around gravity. Could a courtroom finally be a place where truth stood solid, or would it become another stage for her performance? Before the hearing, I was referred to Dr. Ellen Stein, a psychologist who specialized in trauma. Her office was warm, lined with books and soft lamps, so unlike the sterile white of the hospital. "You've described patterns of favoritism and denial," she said gently after listening to my halting account of childhood. "Those aren't small wounds. They set the stage for this kind of violence. What your sister did wasn't born in a vacuum." I stared at the floor. It still feels like maybe I deserved it, that if I had been quieter, kinder, more forgiving. Dr. Stein leaned forward. "That's the voice of conditioning, not truth. Abusers teach us to internalize blame because it keeps us silent. But silence is how injustice thrives." Her words pierced me. Silence had been my family's currency. Now breaking it felt like learning to breathe again. Outside therapy, the storm raged on. Madison's followers alternated between pity and outrage. Some defended her. Others began to whisper doubt as news outlets picked up the story. Sources confirmed security footage exists. Hospital staff witnessed suspicious behavior. At work, emails piled up. Some colleagues sent polite encouragement. Others avoided me. A few I knew wondered if I had orchestrated the drama. In corporate America, reputation is currency, and mine was bleeding. I grieved not just for the fall, but for the image of myself I had spent years crafting competent, unshakable, invisible, no more. Madison had always known where to aim straight at the fault lines of my worth. My parents doubled down. They hired attorney Richard Cooper, a man known for reshaping reality in the courtroom. At a family meeting arranged in my Aunt Jillian's living room, Cooper laid out their plan. "We'll argue emotional distress." Madison was distraught over her grandmother's illness. "A momentary lapse, not a crime. The jury will sympathize." I looked at my parents, and my broken bones. My concussion. Patricia's eyes glittered with rehearsed pain. "Families forgive, Samantha. Why can't you?" Because forgiveness without accountability is just permission, I thought. But aloud, I said, because forgiveness doesn't heal when the wound is still open. Cooper smirked like I was a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "We'll see what the court decides." The courthouse smelled of old wood and coffee. As I took my seat beside Detective Coleman and the district attorney, my heart hammered. Across the aisle, Madison sat between my parents and Cooper. She wore pale blue soft angelic designed to evoke sympathy. Her makeup was understated, her hair pulled back. She looked like a fragile doll. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My ribs protested, but I stood anyway. Justice deserved at least that respect. The prosecutor presented the security footage first. The grainy video played on a large screen showing the stairwell, my cautious descent, Madison's approach, the shove, the fall, the smirk, the whisper. The courtroom held its breath. Then the defense spoke. Cooper rose, voice silky. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you see is a tragic misunderstanding." Madison reached for her sister in concern. The angle of the footage distorts the interaction. "My client is devastated. She has lost sleep, cried endlessly, praying for reconciliation." "Should we criminalize a family dispute?" Madison dabbed at her eyes on cue. My parents leaned toward her arms, protective. The prosecutor called Nurse Linda Dawson to the stand. Calmly, she recounted what she had seen, the look on Madison's face, the whisper, the timing of the tears. "It was assault," she said simply. Her words felt like an anchor dropped into turbulent seas. As testimony unfolded, I drifted in and out of memory. Madison's birthday tantrums. My spelling bee ignored. The promotion overshadowed. Every scene played like a prequel to the shove. Sitting there, I realized this wasn't just about one fall. It was about a lifetime of falls, all invisible, until this one was captured on camera. When it was my turn to testify, my legs trembled. I described the stairwell, the brightness, the echo, the words whispered. I admitted my fear, my pain, my doubt. "Why didn't you speak up sooner throughout your childhood?" the defense pressed. "Because no one believed me," then I said, voice cracking. "But now, the camera does." The judge leaned back, hands steepled. "Based on the evidence, including multiple camera angles and corroborating testimony, there is sufficient cause to proceed with charges of assault against Madison Carter." My chest heaved. Relief mingled with grief. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. The tide had shifted. Madison gasped, turning to my parents. Patricia clutched her pearls. Thomas's jaw locked. For once, their power couldn't shield her. That night, I sat on Aunt Jillian's porch swing. The stars blinked above, indifferent but steady. She handed me tea, her hand warm over mine. "You did it," she said. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "The trial will be brutal. They'll dig into everything: my childhood, my character, my career. And you'll survive it," she said firmly. Because the truth is finally louder than their lies. For the first time, I let myself believe her. Justice doesn't roar all at once. It whispers first in the nod of a nurse, the steadiness of a detective, the grainy truth of a camera. Then it gathers, piece by piece, until the whispers form a voice too strong to ignore. That day in court, justice began to speak. Not in grand declarations, but in the simple acknowledgement: what happened to you mattered. You matter. And for someone who had spent a lifetime invisible, those words were the beginning of freedom. The courthouse loomed like a cathedral of judgment columns, tall and cold steps echoing under the shuffle of anxious feet. Inside, the air buzzed with whispers, the scrape of chairs, the shuffle of papers. This was no longer a private wound, hidden behind brick colonial walls. My family's fractures were about to be displayed for strangers, carved into legal record. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands trembling, despite the stiffness of the cast around my wrist. Across the aisle, Madison adjusted her pale blue blouse and lowered her eyes like a penitent saint. My parents flanked her, their faces carved into masks of sorrow and indignation. The judge entered, gavel striking wood. Court is now in session. And just like that, the years of silence, favoritism, and betrayal marched into the light. The district attorney opened with clarity. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that this was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of aggression. The victim, Samantha Carter, suffered multiple fractures and a concussion. The defendant, her younger sister Madison Carter, attempted to disguise her assault as compassion. But cameras do not lie." The words struck like iron nails driven into wood. My heart pounded as the footage played again, grainy, undeniable. The shove, the fall, the smirk, the whisper. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I heard someone in the gallery mutter, "My God." The prosecutor then called Nurse Linda Dawson. Calm and precise, she described what she had seen, the manipulation, the timed tears, the whispered words. "It was assault," she said. "I would testify to that under oath anywhere." Her certainty felt like a lifeline thrown to me across years of gaslighting. Then came Richard Cooper, striding to the center like an actor taking the stage. "This is not a case of violence," he said smoothly. "This is a case of misunderstanding within a family already under stress." Madison was distraught over her grandmother's illness. She reached for her sister out of concern. The camera angle is misleading. And let us not forget, families argue, emotions run high. Do we really want to criminalize sisterly disputes? He gestured toward Madison, who dabbed delicately at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My parents leaned in protective. The performance was choreographed down to the smallest sigh. But then came the cross-examination. Miss Carter, the prosecutor said, "Can you explain why you whispered, 'You deserved it,' before your sister fell?" Madison froze. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. I didn't say that," she stammered. She must have misheard. "The footage shows your lips moving," the prosecutor pressed. Her eyes darted toward Cooper, then toward our parents. For once, the script faltered. When my name was called, my legs trembled as I walked to the stand. I raised my right hand, swore the oath, and sat down. I spoke slowly, carefully recounting the stairwell, the brightness, the echo, the shove, the fall. I described years of being overshadowed, dismissed, erased. "Why speak up now?" Cooper demanded during cross. "If your sister was truly abusive, why not sooner?" My voice shook, but I met his eyes. Because no one believed me. My parents told me I was jealous, dramatic. For years I doubted myself, but the camera doesn't gaslight. It captured the truth. And the truth is, my sister pushed me. The courtroom was silent. Even Cooper couldn't find words. As the trial unfolded, my parents' devotion to Madison grew frantic. My mother testified, voice quivering. "Madison has always been sensitive, fragile. She couldn't hurt a fly. Samantha must be confused from her injuries." My father added, "Families forgive. This is a private matter, not for the courts." Hearing them deny my broken ribs, my concussion was like being shoved all over again. It wasn't just Madison on trial. It was the entire family dynamic. And in that courtroom, the cracks widened. Finally, Madison herself took the stand. She wore a soft cardigan, hair pinned back, every detail curated for innocence. Through trembling lips, she began, I was upset about Grandma. I wasn't thinking. I reached for Samantha, but she fell. I never meant to hurt her. It was the half-confession strategy, admit just enough to seem remorseful, deny the intent. But under pressure, the cracks showed. "Did you push her?" the prosecutor asked. Madison's eyes brimmed with tears. She hesitated, then whispered, I lost control." Gasps filled the room. Even Cooper shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't full ownership, but it was enough. After days of testimony, the judge's words rang out based on the evidence, including video footage corroborating witnesses and the defendant's partial admission. The court finds Madison Carter guilty of assault. Sentencing will include probation, mandatory therapy, and a restraining order. My chest tightened. Relief washed over me, mixed with grief. I had won, but at the cost of my family. Madison collapsed into sobs. My mother wrapped her arms around her. My father glared at me, eyes hard as steel. To them, I was not the victim. I was the betrayer. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt both lighter and lonelier than ever. Reporters shouted questions. Strangers stared. But the loudest sound was the silence of my parents as they turned their backs. Our family had shattered. The image of unity, the glossy facade we'd maintained for decades, lay in pieces on the courthouse floor. And though it hurt, though it cut deep into the child in me who still longed to be loved, I knew it was necessary. Some things must break to reveal the truth inside. That night, I sat in my apartment, the cast heavy on my wrist, my ribs aching with every breath. I thought about justice. It hadn't restored what was lost. It hadn't erased the years of favoritism or the wounds of neglect. But it had done something vital. It had spoken. For once, the world said, "We see you. We believe you." And even as my family turned away, Even as the bonds of blood crumbled, I felt something unfamiliar: freedom. Because sometimes, to find yourself, you have to let the old self die, the self that kept begging to be seen by people who refused to look. The trial had ended, but peace did not arrive in thunderous applause or triumphant music. Instead, it arrived as silence, dense, unfamiliar, unsettling. For the first time in months, my phone stopped buzzing with updates from lawyers, detectives, reporters. The courthouse steps emptied. The cameras turned away. But silence is a strange thing. It does not always comfort. Sometimes it presses harder than noise. At night, I lay awake in my apartment, ribs aching, wrist heavy in its brace, and wondered what now. I had spent so long fighting against lies, against favoritism, against invisibility, that when the fight paused, I wasn't sure who I was outside of it. Healing begins with the body. That's what my physical therapist, Marcus, reminded me every session. Trust the process, he said, as I struggled to lift a small 2-pound weight, my wrist trembling. Trust had never come easy to me, not with people, not with myself. But Marcus pushed gently, steadily, teaching me to move through pain without collapsing into it. Every inhale, every stretch felt like rebellion. For years in my family, I had learned to shrink, to hold my breath, to stay silent. Now, each controlled breath was proof I was alive. One morning, as I pressed a ball against the wall, working to rebuild my shoulder strength, Marcus nodded. "You're stronger than you realize." And for the first time, I believed him. 2 months after the verdict, a letter arrived. My mother's handwriting, elegant, disciplined, the same loops that once signed my permission slips. My stomach twisted. For weeks, she had been silent. No phone calls, no visits. Now her words arrived in black ink. "Samantha, I don't know when things went wrong. Perhaps we failed you more than we ever admitted. We let Madison's needs consume our attention. We didn't see you clearly, and for that, I am sorry. I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that I see it now." I read it once, twice, then again. Was it truth or another attempt to patch the family facade? I couldn't tell. But something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, at least not yet, but acknowledgement. Even if late, even if imperfect, it cracked the wall of denial. I placed the letter in a drawer, not ready to answer, but not ready to burn it either. One chilly October morning, I returned to Massachusetts General. I carried a basket of flowers, not for closure, but for gratitude. Nurse Linda met me at the lobby. Her eyes lit up. "You look radiant," she said, hugging me carefully. "I feel alive," I replied, realizing it was true. We walked together down the familiar halls. The stairwell appeared the same gray concrete, sterile lights, echoes bouncing off walls. But standing there now, I didn't feel terror. I felt resilience. "This place doesn't own me anymore," I whispered. Linda smiled. "That's the spirit of healing, when the place of breaking becomes the place of rebirth." At night, I often visited Aunt Jillian. Her porch swing became sanctuary. We sat under the stars, tea steaming between us. "You've lost a family," she said one evening, her voice steady. "But you're building a new one, not through blood, but through truth." Her words rooted themselves in me. Blood ties had betrayed me, but belonging could be built in other ways, with those who chose me, who believed me. Therapy with Dr. Stein became less about recounting trauma and more about imagining life beyond it. "You still carry guilt," she noted one session. I sighed. "Sometimes I think, if I had stayed silent, none of this would have happened. The family wouldn't be broken." She leaned forward. "Your silence didn't preserve the family. It preserved the illusion. The truth broke it, yes, but the truth also freed you." Her words sliced through the fog. For decades, survival had meant silence. Now survival meant voice. Healing wasn't dramatic. It came in fragments. The first time, I laughed without pain in my ribs. The first sunrise I watched from my balcony, golden light spilling across Boston like forgiveness. The first dinner with friends who toasted not to my endurance in silence, but to my courage in speaking. I planted herbs on my windowsill, basil, rosemary, mint. Watching them grow reminded me of myself, fragile at first, then stubbornly alive. I cooked again, filling my apartment with scents of garlic and tomato, reminding myself that nourishment was an act of love, not something I needed to earn. Every small act became reclamation proof that my life belonged to me. Back at the office, whispers lingered. Some colleagues eyed me with pity, others with doubt. But my boss, Martin, surprised me. "You've been through hell," he said, calling me into his office. "But your resilience, that's leadership. Take your time, but when you're ready, I see a future for you here." It wasn't redemption, but it was possibility. For years, I had equated career success with worth. Now I realized worth was intrinsic. Work could be an expression of it, not the proof of it. 6 months after the fall, I stood at the Charles River. The water shimmered breeze cool against my face. My scars ached with weather shifts, but my heart no longer collapsed under their weight. I whispered, "I survived, and I am not invisible anymore." The river carried my words, rippling them outward, a promise that healing was not the end, but the beginning. Rebirth isn't about forgetting pain. It's about weaving it into the fabric of who you become. I was no longer just the daughter overlooked, the sister betrayed. I was a woman who stood, who spoke, who rebuilt. Healing twisted, faltered, circled back. Some days I still woke with nightmares. Some days grief pressed heavy. But with each sunrise, I rose too. And maybe that's what rebirth truly is, not the erasure of scars, but the courage to live with them and still bloom. By the time spring arrived, the scars on my body had faded into pale reminders, but the scars inside were still tender. I stood on the balcony of my apartment watching the city bloom again, trees, budding sidewalks alive with laughter. For the first time, I felt the seasons inside me shift too. Winter had been long, brutal, suffocating. But now, something within was thawing. The trial, the betrayal, the years of silence, they were chapters behind me. And what lay ahead was blank, terrifying, but also freeing. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Memories still returned to me at 8 years old, holding a cake that suddenly bore my sister's name. My father's words, "Why can't you be more generous like your sister?" For years, those memories haunted me like ghosts. But standing here now, I realized something: ghosts lose their power when you stop running from them. They were no longer proof of my unworthiness. They were evidence of what I had endured and survived. One afternoon, another envelope arrived. My father's handwriting this time, sharp and patient. "Samantha, you may think you've won, but what you've done has destroyed this family. Madison is broken. Your mother is ill with worry. I hope one day you realize the cost of your choices. Blood should matter more than pride." I held the letter, anger rising like a tide. For years, those words, "blood should matter," kept me chained. But now I saw the truth. Blood without respect is just biology. I burned the letter, watched the flames curl the paper into ash, and in the smoke, I felt release. When I told Dr. Stein about the letter, she nodded. "Closure doesn't always come from reconciliation," she said. "Sometimes closure is the decision to stop knocking on a locked door." I asked her, "Does it make me cruel to walk away?" Her eyes softened. "No, it makes you alive. You're not abandoning family, you're choosing yourself. That's not cruelty, that's survival." For so long, I believed survival meant silence. Now I knew survival meant drawing boundaries sharp enough to protect the fragile rebirth inside me. To move forward, I created rituals, small ones, but sacred. Every morning, I lit a candle and wrote one sentence beginning with, "I deserve." At first, the words felt foreign. I deserve kindness. I deserve rest. But slowly, they became truths. On weekends, I walked by the river, leaving a pebble behind, each time symbols of letting go. Once a month, I hosted dinners with friends who became chosen family. We laughed, spilled wine, shared stories. No manipulation, no favoritism, no erasure. Just presence. These rituals became scaffolding for the life I was building. News of Madison's life reached me in fragments: probation meetings, therapy sessions, whispers of her struggling to rebuild her social media image. A part of me still wanted to ask, why? Why was I never enough for you? But another part finally understood that the answer would never heal me. Some wounds remain raw because the person who inflicted them refuses to acknowledge them. And I couldn't live my life waiting for Madison to hand me peace. Peace had to be chosen by me, for me. At work, opportunities returned. Martin asked me to lead a new campaign. "We need someone with resilience," he said. "You've proven that more than anyone." I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to pour my life into marketing metrics anymore. But I took the role not for validation, but as proof to myself that I could step forward without fear of being erased. Outside work, I began volunteering with a local support group for survivors of family abuse. Standing in front of strangers, I told my story not as a victim, but as someone who had found her voice. Their eyes, wet with recognition, told me I wasn't alone. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. On the 1-year anniversary of the fall, I returned to the stairwell. The cold concrete, the echo, the fluorescent lights, it all looked the same. But I wasn't the same. I placed a single flower on the step where I had landed, not as a marker of tragedy, but as a symbol of survival. Then I walked to the river, watched the water shimmer endless free. I whispered, "The final lesson is this family doesn't define me. Their lies don't erase me. I am not what they chose not to see. I am what I choose to become." The final lesson was not about justice, though justice mattered. It was not about healing wounds, though healing came slowly. It was about choice. The choice to speak even when silenced. The choice to leave even when blood bound me. The choice to live even when life tried to erase me. I am Samantha Carter. I am scarred but not broken. I am reborn not because they changed, but because I did. And that is the final lesson: freedom is not given. It is claimed.